Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Global Health. This episode that we're doing today is going to focus on women leaders in global health, and this is going to be in recognition of International Women's Day, which is on Tuesday, March the 8th. We're going to dive into women's representation in the workforce, issues of underrepresentation in leadership, advice from some leaders in the women's empowerment field, and highlight some key organizations advocating for and supporting women leaders. Before we dive in, I'm just going to go around and let everyone introduce themselves. My name is Katie, and I am based out of Stockholm, Sweden.
My name's Angelica, and I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hey, my name is Raul, and I'm calling from Charleston, South Carolina.
And I'm Samskriti, and I'm talking to you from Ireland.
And I'm Sarah Weber, talking from Washington, D.C.
Great, thanks so much. So Samskriti, I wonder if you can just give us a little bit of background.
Absolutely. So women actually make up the large majority of the health workforce, with areas like nursing and midwifery almost entirely, composed of women. But when we look at the leadership in the bigger sphere of global health, we see very few female leaders. And a recent Lancet article by Sharmila Devi notes that the problem is more widespread than that, and actually seeps into other fields like politics, social activism, and academia, where men tend to dominate the higher echelons of these fields, despite women comprising a significant sector of the workforce. So there's a big gender disparity in leadership.
So some of you may be wondering, why is it important that we have an equal gender representation? And let me just dive into a couple things. First of all, there's a lot of disadvantages to having a lack of gender diversity. The International Women's Health Commission notes that female leaders advance gender equity, and they're more likely to push forward on issues such as paternal leave, pension, maternity care, and physical situations like gender-based violence, safety, and development and poverty reduction.
There's been an overwhelmingly international support for increasing women's participation through agreements like CEDAW, which is the Beijing Platform for Action, and the International Parliamentary Union. However, women still do not participate in political, economic, and public life at nearly the same rates as men. Today, women only make up 22% of the parliamentarians worldwide and just 5% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies. Only 44 countries have met the international goal that women make up 30% of national legislators.
And the problem doesn't just end there. Not only are there few female leaders, but there is even less representation of those female leaders at conferences, scientific committees, and even the media.
Yeah, and even the panels tend to be predominantly white men, even when it comes to issues about women. A recent U.S. Senate hearing on reproductive rights, specifically the funding for Planned Parenthood in December 2015, was actually completely composed of men.
Wow, that really shows how deep the issue is.
It really does.
But this isn't a situation that is uncommon. There has been an effort to highlight this using social media. Ilona Kickbush, who brought light to this in her 2013 and 2014 Twitter campaign asking for nominees of the top women leaders in global health. Also, Dr. Sahar Samara, a researcher in the international relations of University of Tampere in Finland, created a Tumblr page called All White Panels, which features and brings attention to how commonplace all white panels are.
And there's been some recent push to highlight this issue of lack of representation on panels and presentations and other things. There's a group called Gender Avengers, and they actually have an app that allows people to report if there's a panel that only has men on it. And it's really highlighted the issue on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and so that's some progress.
Definitely, and there's even an initiative that has been launched called the Women Leaders in Global Health Initiative. Now, this is an initiative that's between two organizations, the Global Health Council and the Women in Global Health movement. And this is a question, or it was launched in response to a question in the spring 2015 that said, why aren't there more women represented in the highest levels of global health, and what can we do about it? With the aspiration to recognize and develop female leaders in global health through a gender equity lens. The WLGHI focuses on the strategic priorities of advocacy, networking, mentorship, and capacity building to affect social change. They work with partners at all levels to achieve greater gender equality in health leadership and ensure the visibility of and meaningful presence of women in global health decision-making and thought leadership. The goals of this initiative are to increase access to leadership positions for all women, as well as the visibility and recognition of women leaders in global health through advocacy. And visibility is really important. It's definitely the way that we look up to the leaders in our own view, and if we do not have role models in these positions, then we don't aspire to be like them. Another goal is to increase networking and mentorship opportunities for women, and a third is to optimize opportunities for capacity building and skill development. Actually, on March 8th, there is going to be a campaign launched by the Women in Global Health movement, and it's going to be called the #ILeadGH campaign, or #ILeadGH. And this is going to showcase the diversity in global health. This social media-based campaign, which is going to be mostly through Twitter, will collect photos and taglines from individuals around the globe who self-identify as a leader in global health. And they're going to use this #ILeadGH. It's going to go on for about a year, and if you are interested in joining the campaign, please tweet a photo of yourself with a tagline about why you think you are a leader in global health. Use the #ILeadGH, and you can also submit nominations, a name or photo, and any less than 120-character message using this hashtag as well to Women in Global Health. We'll put the link and the email in at the bottom of our video as well. The aim of this campaign is to increase the visibility of all genders, generations, global regions, and ethnicities in our field and transform the face of global health. This campaign is brought to you by the Women Leaders in Global Health Initiative, which is a joint collaboration between Women in Global Health and the Global Health Council.
So another organization that's leading change is called Foreign Policy Interrupted, and the issue that they deal with is that there are very few female foreign policy experts that are allowed the opportunity to comment on foreign policy issues, which is quite unfortunate. In fact, a report by Women's Media Center found that on the front page of the New York Times, men were quoted 3 times more often than women, and a study by the Washington Post recently compiled data from events hosted by 6 leading think tanks in Washington, D.C., and they found that not a single woman spoke at the 150 events that were on the Middle East, which is really, really sad. And FPI actually attributes this to 2 issues. One being that that sometimes women tend to hesitate to put themselves forward and volunteer for situations like this, and the other issue is that bookers, editors, and producers have to keep up with the ever-changing news cycle, so they tend to contact the people that they already know, and as the New York Times puts it, this usually tends to be a long list of white men. And Foreign Policy Interrupted is actually tackling this situation by finding solutions from the ground up. And it does so by something called a cohesive fellowship program, whereby they empower women to put themselves forward and connect them with resources that will allow their work to be better seen. And their aim is to increase the ethnic, racial, and geographic representation of foreign policy experts, which totally makes sense because we're becoming an increasingly diverse world.
Great points. And another key area here is changing the gender dynamics in politics. The Canadian and Rwandan governments have actually done a great job in this area. They've been pioneering some great work in creating a new generation of female leaders. For instance, Justin Trudeau, the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he stated that we need to embrace feminism in order to improve decision-making in politics and business. And it's actually really interesting. So he appointed a gender-balanced cabinet of 15 women and 15 men upon being elected. And when he was asked why, he simply responded, because it's 2015.
That's a great point. So when it comes to women's political participation, Rwanda is the world's leader. It has 64%, which is the highest percentage of women parliamentarians in any country. It's reached these levels in 2013, far surpassing 30% quota established in 2003, showing that once women have the opportunity to lead, they meet and exceed expectations and are able to compete with and win general elections. The increase in women in parliament in Rwanda has resulted in the passage of a landmark legislation ending gender violence, discrimination, and investments in health. including significant investments in women and adolescents' sexual and reproductive health. The country has made concerted efforts to expand opportunities for women at all levels, and these investments include granting property rights for women, facilitating the entry into the workforce, and contributing to some of the highest rates of economic growth in Africa.
I have to do that as a proud Canadian. I also wanted to make a comment that there was, we were at a conference in Washington, and the ambassador to Rwanda that was based in Washington had said, not only are we creating, this great diversity in our government, but we are now also raising a generation of men that are used to seeing women in power. So we have young men that are now used to this diversity and this balance as well, which I think is really going to show as the generation gets older. I think that's really interesting as well.
Katie, that's a great point. Thanks for highlighting that, and that's good to hear. I just wanted to dive in a little bit with what can women do that want to become leaders in global health or just in any sector. And Sheryl Sandberg, who's an advocate, has spoke about this, and she is the author of Lean In, which has become a really famous book. But anyway, she provides 3 key advice to women. She says, sit at the table, so both physically and figuratively, really be at the table. Number 2, make sure that your partners are really partners. So there's a lot of evidence that shows that women are still, even if they're in the workforce, they're doing a lot more of the household and child rearing than the men. So make sure that there's an equal partnership. And then the 3rd piece is don't leave until you leave. And that's really talking about if a woman is thinking she's wanting to start a family, women often stop really volunteering for things, and she's just saying make sure you're really active and present until you physically leave the workforce. So 3 key points that are good for women to think about.
That's a really great point, Sarah, because in order to have a sustainable equality for gender representation in leadership, we need to actually empower women. And another organization that does this is called He for She, which advocates for gender equality. Now, this movement was created by the UN in order to change the conversation about gender equality to not only being a woman's issue, but being a human rights issue. And this campaign addresses problems that range from education to identity to work and to politics. And since its launch in September of 2014, several heads of state, CEOs, and representatives from all walks of life have committed to gender equality, which is a really great sign because it's also garnered a lot of popularity on social media from all over the world. So it's really getting the conversation going and starting to create change that's instilled within societal values.
Yeah, great points. And it's really nice to hear that there are all these initiatives that are going on. So even though we see that there's a problem, there is a lot of work being done in this field. And so hopefully that means that the conversations going forward, we have generally a more gender equal leadership level within global health. And I think that's really important because I find global health is the unifying field where we bring all the other sectors together. So just to conclude, women are absent from positions of leadership despite being a significant part of the workforce. The health workforce is actually one of the most dichotomous sectors when you look at the workforce, which is predominantly female, and the leadership level, which is predominantly male. Other sectors see a lack of women all across the board, but health has a specific dichotomy that is really noticeable. And what's worse is that even fewer women are represented as leaders, as panelists in conferences, as expert opinionists, and these are all dominated by men. The good news, though, is obviously that we've highlighted a bunch of organizations and people that are working towards making this a different scenario. Some of the ways that they're doing this is by calling out all male or male-dominated panels, by researching and capacity building and doing advocacy. So, for example, there's not a lot of research being done in female leadership in global health, and so how can we address the problem if we have no background research on it? Also, changing the gender dynamics of the political sphere and empowering women. So, International Women's Day, which is going to be on Tuesday, March 8th, marks a great day on which to identify the gender disparities that continue to face women and celebrate those who advocate for its improvement. For more information about any of the people or the organizations that we mentioned in this show, they're going to be in the description below. And I hope that this International Women's Day, you take advantage of exploring these organizations and putting your voice to a cause. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, and we'll speak to you later. Bye.
Bye.